Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Friday, August the 4th, 2023. We continue our conversation of the abundant life and that it's about grace, not works, that we started yesterday. The reading for today is from the Gospel of John, the first chapter. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. We've seen his glory. The glory is of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me." From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I once came across the following: when a person works an 8-hour day and receives a fair day's pay for his or her time, that's a wage. And when a person competes with an opponent and receives a trophy for his or her performance, that's a prize. And when a person receives appropriate recognition for his or her long service or high achievements, that's an award. But when a person is not capable of earning a wage, can win no prize, deserves no reward, yet receives such a gift anyway, that's a good picture of God's unmerited favor. That's what we mean when we talk about the grace of God. True story, two pastors were once on their way to Atlanta for a large men's gathering, and one of them had never been in the South before, and after staying in a motel overnight, they stopped at a nearby restaurant for some breakfast. And when their meal was delivered, the pastor, who had never been to the South before, saw this white, mushy-looking stuff on his plate. And so when the waitress came by, again, he asked her what it was. And she said, "Grits." And he said, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but I didn't order it, and I'm not going to pay for it." To which she replied, "Sir, down here, you don't order it, you don't pay for it, you just get it." And so it is with grace. And that's precisely what makes Christianity different from all other religions and faiths in the world. Years ago, this very question was raised and discussed at a conference, and some of the participants argued that Christianity is unique in teaching that God became man. But someone objected, saying that other religions teach similar doctrines. Well, what about the resurrection? No, it was argued some other faiths believe that the dead rise again as well. So the discussion grew heated. Finally, C.S. Lewis, one of the leading Christian apologists of the 20th century, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia and other works defending and articulating the faith like Mere Christianity, came in late and sat down. And listening to the heated discussion, he turned to the person next to him and asked, "What's all this rumpus about?" And when he learned that it was a debate about the uniqueness of Christianity, he immediately commented, "Oh, that's easy. It's grace." He was absolutely correct. The very heart of the gospel is that God accepts us with no conditions whatsoever. Although we are helplessly sinful, our gracious God forgives us completely. It's by his infinite grace that we are saved, not by moral character, not by good works, not by commandment keeping or by frequent church going. We do nothing except simply receive the free gift of God's pardon through faith in Jesus Christ. Now, of course, that again sounds too easy. And what's more, it sounds like permissiveness, like a license to go out and do as we please, because after all, God will just forgive us in the end. But as Robert Farrar Capon writes, while you and I may be worried about seeming to give permission, Jesus apparently wasn't. He wasn't afraid of giving the prodigal son a kiss instead of a lecture, a party instead of probation. And he proved that by bringing in the elder brother at the end of the story and having him raise pretty much the same objections as we do. He's angry about the party. He complains that his father is lowering his standards and ignoring virtue, that music and dancing and a fatted calf are in effect just so many permissions to break the law. And to that, Jesus, as the master, say only one thing: cut that out. We're not playing good boys and bad boys anymore. Your brother was dead, and he's alive again. The name of the game from now on is resurrection, not bookkeeping. In their book entitled Speechless, Christian singer Stephen Curtis Chapman and his pastor Scotty Smith once said this: "In the gospel we discover we are far worse off than we thought and far more loved than we ever dreamed." It's in the Gospel of John that we hear that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish but may have eternal life. It's also in John's Gospel, as we heard today, where we learn that the fullness of God's grace came into our world and was revealed to us in Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh. In Jesus, God came to be with us and to live among us. And it is through Jesus, through his incarnation, that we have truly come to know the Father, especially God's unconditional love and unmerited grace. The grandfather once walked into his daughter's family room and found his grandson Jeffrey standing up in his playpen crying. He looked so pitiful standing there in his little baseball t-shirt and diaper. His face was red and tear-stained from crying, but when little Jeffrey saw his grandpa, his face lit up in a way that melted the old man's heart, and he immediately lifted up his chubby little arms in his grandfather's direction. "Out, Papa, out," said little Jeffy. Well, what grandfather could resist such a plea? So he walked over to the playpen and reached down to lift his grandson out of captivity and distress. Just then, however, Law and Order stepped into the room, otherwise known as little Jeffy's mother, the grandfather's daughter. She had come out of the kitchen and she still had a dish towel in her hand when she scolded him. "No, Jeffy, you're being punished. You have to stay in your playpen. Leave him right there, Dad." Now, what was this grandfather to do? The little boy's tears and reaching little hands tugged mightily at his heart. But on the other hand, he didn't want to interfere with his daughter's discipline either. What could he do? He couldn't very well stay in the same room reading the newspaper and completely ignoring his crying grandson. What could he do? Well, love finally found a way. Since Grandpa couldn't take Jeffy out of the playpen, he climbed in there with him. "If you're in the playpen, little buddy," he said, "then I'm in the playpen right there with you." And in finding a big jolly grandpa suddenly sharing his little prison cell, little Jeffy found comfort even in his captivity. Isn't that what happens to us as well? We've made a complete mess of things and have created our own captivity here on earth. But instead of simply ignoring our cries for help, God has done what that grandfather did. In Jesus, God came to share our troubles and our pain, to share the human condition. The good news is that God loved us so much that when we couldn't come to him, he instead came to be with us. Abundant living is all about grace, not works. It's about a loving God who climbs into our playpen because we couldn't find our own way out. It's about experiencing God's forgiveness even though we know we don't deserve it. It's about being set free from sin and guilt through faith in Jesus Christ. It's about basking in the love of God each and every day and then finding that peace and wholeness which allows us to truly enjoy the abundant blessings that God has so graciously given us. Well, I hope you have a great day, and looking forward to being together with you one more time this week tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye.